Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and this week I am super thrilled to be bringing you a conversation with an author I haven't chatted with before. Lora Senf joins me to talk about her YA novel, Unnamed Bones. Now, this novel is heavy, and it is a lot of heavy lifting in terms of exploring emotional trauma, feelings of depression, and that very young person kind of perspective on carrying a lot of emotional weight and what that really feels like in a landscape that feels really isolated and frightening. Laura and I talk about all of this, plus plenty more things. It is a really, really interesting conversation, and I'm so thrilled and delighted that I got the chance to chat with Laura about this book because it just does so much on so many levels. I'll let you all listen in now, and I will catch up with all of you after. Hello, Laura. Welcome to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am so thrilled to be chatting with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I have been very busy lately. I feel like I've been
Oh, you
traveling.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've been traveling a lot lately, and I'm finally like home for a few weeks, and I can finally like get some podcasting done, get some recording done, get some editing done, and get back in a groove for a little bit. But of course, that'll all be upended by the end of June. So it's all good.
What's happening at the end of June?
I am going on a family beach trip. I am going to Colorado, and then I start a graduate degree program in July. So
Oh, okay. So get some sleep now is
yeah.
what you need to do. Sleep
Pretty
now.
much. Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah. What about you? You've been busy. You said that you were related.
Well, I mean, I have a day job. I've got kids who, as of yesterday, are out of school for the summer. So
Yeah.
I've got brand new seventh graders in my house. And I don't think we'll hear from them today while we're chatting, but it's possible. I mean, you would think by 12 they have boundaries established, but it's shaky. So we could hear from them today at some point.
So fair, so fair. But yeah, no, summer is always a very interesting time, I feel like, for the kiddos, especially new summer, whenever summer is exciting
Right,
and that
right.
the freedom is bright and shiny and new. So I feel that. But no, that is an incredibly busy time, so I get it. But we are here today to talk about your book, Unnamed Bones, which is coming out this July. It's a YA novel, and a lot of people have been recommending you to me to read as a middle grade author. And a lot, I know
Mhm.
you for your Blight Harbor series. And I have copies of them. I'm meaning to get to them. I will get to them one day. But I'm
Understood.
yeah, I am so thrilled though that I got the chance to read Unnamed Bones because oh my God, like this book is just a powerhouse for me, for a lot of
Oh,
reasons
thank you.
that we'll get into. But I want to go ahead and just kind of start off by letting you introduce yourself for my listeners and the book, and then we can kind of jump off from there.
Sure. So Laura Senf, and I am best known for the Blight Harbor books. Started with The Clackety that came out in 2022. That was the first of what will be five books in the Blight Harbor world. Um, I have one other YA book. It's very, very different than Unnamed Bones. It's called The Lost and Fountain. It's fantasy, really fantasy more than horror. Unnamed Bones is my foray into young adult horror,
Hmm.
and I really tried to go hard on horror in this one. That was my goal. Um, in short, Unnamed Bones, and so forgive me, I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about this book. Unnamed Bones is a young adult cosmic survival creature horror. And in it, our main character is 16-year-old Harrow, and she and her three acquaintances take an ill-advised day trip to an impossible island that is set in an equally impossible lake and valley. And over the course of 24 hours, they have to survive the island and themselves and one another. And during all of this, Harrow has to contend with her emotions, who she has quite literally given faces and bodies and locked away in a seedy motel in her mind, and they become part of the tapestry of the island that the kids are on. So that's a very loose way of talking about Unnamed Bones.
No, that was perfect. That's spot on, and you covered so many bases about things that I want to talk about that I feel like we can talk about without getting too much into spoiler territory. So that's perfect. I want to start off, to me, horror is horror. I don't really care how old you are. There are things that are horrifying to me as a 3-year-old, and they're
Hmm.
still horrifying
Hmm.
to me now. But I do know, in publishing and writing books, there is a way to kind of turn that horror in a way that is age specific, as you have done with middle grade and now YA. And I kind of wanted to hear from you possibly about your approach to writing, because you just said, you really wanted to lean into the horror with this one.
Hmm.
So like what was your mindset like when you were drafting this book, maybe like compared to your Blythe Harper books? Like was there a change in how you approached them, or was it more the same, like how was that?
A little of both. So I'm fortunate in that maybe it's a case of arrested development, but I can tap into my middle school self pretty easily, and I can tap
Yeah.
into my high school self pretty easily. And so in both cases, middle grade and young adult, you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to connect with, who you were at that age to write authentically from that point of view. Um, so that part stays the same. With middle grade, you are more thoughtful about the gatekeepers. Because with
Hmm.
young adult, and now we can swear on this podcast, correct? I know
Oh
I've
my
heard.
God, let it rip,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So with young adult, my characters can say fuck, and they
Hmm.
can say and do horrible things, right? That you can get away with in the young adult space, even though middle school kids say those things and think
Yeah.
those things, you can't quite as authentically put that on the page for middle grade writing, and that is mostly due to gatekeepers, the
Hmm.
parents, the teachers, the librarians. If I filled a Blight Harbor book with authentic 13-year-old talk, it would never get on the shelves of the classroom, right? It just wouldn't
Yeah.
make it there. The teachers would, and I'm not mad at teachers for this. I'm not mad at parents for this. It's just the reality
Hmm.
that people aren't going to shelve a book like that necessarily for kids. Um, so you have to just be a little more aware of what you're putting on the page for that age group. And yeah, young adult, it's a little more free. I felt a lot less constrained by what I was able to say and do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you in the if you wrote an authentically 13-year-old
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
yeah, it would be much the same probably as like the YA book of like 16-year-old Anna and 13-year-old Anna weren't that far, in between. But that is something that I contend with a lot, is like the business side of publishing and writing books, kind of the rules that, you I don't
Hmm.
want to say have to follow, but are advised to follow, and then the creative process. It's always very interesting to me, kind of what comes out of the combination of the two. And especially with something like, books that are meant for middle grade readers, for young adult readers,
Yeah.
those things kind of come into play. So I'm always kind of
Well,
interested in how that works with one another.
I don't want to make it sound all negative, though. There's a really significant positive that comes out of having to limit things like language and violence on the page for middle grade books. And that is that you have to rely really heavily on quality story and
Yeah.
quality writing. So you've got to be able to tell a really fine story um, that can't rely on sex and violence and vulgarity, right? You can't fall back on those things. And so I think it forces middle grade writing to be really high quality because you've got to find another way to capture your audience, and that's through having good story, good characters. So I think there is a positive that comes out of that when you're writing middle grade.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like you have to kind of I don't want to say get more to the point, but if you do want to kind of add those accents, those, like
Hmm.
you have to find a different way to do it. And
Hmm.
it's a really interesting way, I think, especially because, we're adults when we're writing at this point, right? Like we're talking as adults right now, but we're talking about something of, like you said, you have to relate to younger Laura to
Right.
write these stories in an authentic way. So it's a really interesting kind of psychological exercise whenever I think about it, tapping into those things, those emotions, and that language. And I think that that's something that you did exceptionally well with Unnamed Bones, because
Oh, thank you.
Unnamed Bones, I feel like the word that I keep coming back to, and this is going to sound a little illustrative, but I'm going to get to the point, is vocabulary, because Unnamed Bones, sitting with Harrow in this journey, she provided a vocabulary for her emotions
Hmm.
that I feel like I would have related to whenever I was her age that I didn't quite know how to formulate or say. And I do want to ask where the idea for Unnamed Bones came from for you, because this, like you said, it's a really interesting book. The word that you kept using in your synopsis was impossible, an
Hmm.
impossible island, an impossible situation, all these things. So it's a book of impossibilities, but they are possible. And so I kind of want to hear where this story came from for you.
There wasn't a really clean start to this story. There was an initial inspiration, and it was so I actually started with the title on this particular book, and I was, reading one of those throwaway articles that you come across online when you're just scrolling and doing nothing, just wasting time.
Yeah.
And it was one of those mini articles that talked about how some people, actually lots of people, have got extra bones in their bodies. And they're called like supernumerary or accessory bones. And typically they occur in your hand or your foot, but they can happen in your hip or your neck. And they're sometimes the result of bones that didn't fuse during infancy, and sometimes they're
Mhm.
literally just extra little tiny bones. But each of these bones doesn't have a name, it's just a little extra bone. And it doesn't do anything, it doesn't serve a purpose, but it can kind of cause problems. So if you've got them in your hands and you use your hands a lot, there's a chance that they cause problems. If you're a dancer and you've got them in your feet, they could cause problems and need to be removed. So they don't serve a purpose, but they can cause a problem. And this started just rolling around in my head. And I thought, well, I don't know why this is catching my attention, but I love the idea of these unnamed bones that don't do anything good, but could do something bad and that really have no purpose at all in the body. And so then I kind of expanded that. Okay, so what if that was a person? And what if that person, as far as they were concerned, looking at themselves,
Mhm.
didn't serve a purpose in the greater world, in the universe. And really the only thing they had to contribute was negative. And what if that was how they saw themselves? They saw themselves um in this way of almost being worse because they don't matter and all they contribute is the negative. And that's where Harrow started to come from. So the story started from title. I knew
Mhm.
the title of it immediately, and then I met Harrow, and then
Yeah.
it just went from there.
Well, I do also kind of want to ask, how did it feel like to meet Harrow? Because one, I think what you just described so aptly, or at least for me, is the coming of age experience, right?
Hmm.
Of not understand like and like understanding what it means to have an identity. That's not just like your name and where you fall in line at school, whenever you say line up in,
Right.
in last name order, like understanding your place in the world. And I mean, to me, Harrow perfectly encapsulates the coming of age, trying to figure out who you are experience, like that she's in the thick of it. But how did it feel like to meet her? Like, I want to hear about your relationship with her because she's a really fascinating character to me.
So I Harrow is not me, but
Hmm.
I very much relate to Harrow. The way she sees herself was very similar to the way I saw myself at that age. Um, I was very much the kind of dark, angsty kid, and that's Harrow. But meeting Harrow, as with meeting a lot of my characters, it's almost like they introduce themselves to me, and I just listen. And the first chapter of Unnamed Bones is almost how Harrow introduced herself to me. She just said, um, I've been falling as long as I can remember, and this is what that means, and this is what it means for me in my life, and this is how it all started, and this is where I'm going with it. And I just listened. And I know that sounds kind of insane. I'm aware that that sounds a little bit bonkers, but it
No,
truly
I
is
don't
how I
think
meet my
so.
characters. I just listen to them, and they start telling me their story, and then I start figuring out a plot that works with that.
Yeah, no, and I don't think that that sounds crazy at all. I think that sometimes our best ideas kind of pop up out of, or what we think is out of the blue. Nine times out of
Mhm.
10, we'll look back and be like, oh, this happened this day, and this is probably what
That's
triggered
right.
that thought. But, it feels very sudden, and it also feels like really important to capitalize on that whenever they come.
Mhm.
But no, I, I mean, right off the bat with this book, I mean, within the first few pages, you talk about that feeling of her feeling heavier. She's always falling. Gravity affects her different than other people. And without saying it, if you read the jacket copy, the synopsis of the book, it says that Harrow is depressed, but never really once, I don't think in your book, I don't think that that word is really
thrown
No,
around. It's
no.
just this language that is used, that she feels heavier. She feels like she's, constantly falling. And I wanted to talk about using that language instead of saying, well, I'm just depressed or I'm just whatever, because I do feel like, and this could just be me, we're very quick to slap labels on things these days, which is a good
Hmm.
thing. Sometimes it's a very great thing. But sometimes understanding how that feels for somebody is equally important. And I think talking about it in a way that you write about it is so important. So I kind of just wanted to give you the space to talk about how she feels in that way, you know?
I suppose I wasn't anxious to slap a label on it, which actually I did in Blight Harbor. I gave my main character anxiety and very like was very forthright about it. This
Yeah.
character has anxiety and she has to go through a very scary situation dealing with that. I sort of did the opposite with Harrow, and I described how she felt, like you said, without labeling it. And I think I did that because for Harrow, the label doesn't really matter. She wouldn't
Hmm.
be all that interested in what other people call it.
Yeah.
She's much more interested in the internal and in how she's experiencing this day to day. And she is pretty self-absorbed and she is sort of navel gazing in a way, but I think not in an unusual way for that age. I think
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's actually very real for that age, that whether they would say it or not, they sort of are the center of the universe, right? Like at any given time. And so she's very involved in what's happening internally and less interested in what you and I would call that.
Yeah, and I think that that's so, to me that's like the teenage experience, right? It's like
Yeah,
you kind of can't get out of your own way. Like, and like
yeah,
everything that you do is because of you, and cause and effect is all
right,
you.
right.
Um, so it was really interesting to kind of sit with her in that. And then, the other piece of this too is that you talk about how she names her emotions and like gives them appearances, and she's created this motel in her mind that she kind of slots these emotions in, and she talks about how they may or may not interact with one another and what kind of room
Mhm.
they, like all these different things. I want to hear about how you kind of landed on that depiction for this, because it was really gorgeous. It sounds
Oh,
very strange maybe to say because you described it as a seedy motel, but to have that kind of language or understanding of how, your emotions may or may not interact with one another in a very personable way, and who shows up some days. Like sometimes it is the anxiety or the sadness or the whatever that is going to come out of their room that day. That
right.
feels so big to me, you know? So how did you land on this motel, or come up with this motel?
I wish I had a great answer for where this came from. I wanted Harrow to very literally have sort of punished her feelings for existing, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't want feelings. She would rather be a person void of emotion. And so she has found herself, and we don't really know when this started in Harrow's story. We don't know exactly when she started doing this, but she has found a way in her own head to just lock her feelings away, and she chose to do that by putting them in a hotel or motel, I'm sorry, in a desert in the middle of nowhere and locking them each in their own individual rooms. Now, Hera's a kid that lives in the Pacific Northwest. There's a good chance what we know of her life, she's probably never been to the desert. So I think she probably chose the desert because it seems so far away. It would
Yeah.
seem to her so far removed and so remote from anything that she knows. So that's her again just pushing that out as far as she can so that she doesn't have to face her feelings, which is a lot of what this comes down to. It's that she doesn't want to have to deal with what they mean and what it means to be a person with feelings in the world.
Absolutely. And then, kind of to further that idea, this ill-advised day trip that her and her friends take is to what you call the Impossible Island.
Right.
And we always talk about how it feels to be on an island, and all these different things. So thematically, that that works exceptionally well with all of this. But to me, there's you called it survivalist, right? Like this, once they're there, they kind of realize it's not going to be as easy to get back home as they
Right.
once,
Right.
anticipated, I think is the best way to say it. And there is kind of the survivalist horror aspect of this, kind of this like man versus nature of what we're thinking when we get there. And then it really turns on its head and it's something else. And
Hmm.
you combine psychological horror with kind of a cosmic otherworldly kind of horror. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that. And in my mind, I am not a cosmic horror fan. Like I have a really hard time grasping cosmic
Sure.
horror. Like just, I have a really hard time picturing it and kind of moving through a story. But whenever you combine psychological horror, the way that Harrow is experiencing it and what is going on in this island, it was super vivid and clear to me. And I wanted to kind of talk to you about the combination of, and like, even if you see them as these things, because you could see this very differently than how I read it. But like kind of combining these like two themes to create this really, for lack of better words, harrowing situation for Harrow.
So you're about to find out how simple and shallow I am.
Oh
And
no.
the answer is very simple and very shallow, actually. Um, when I write, I don't often think in terms of themes and these big picture things. I just tell a story.
Yeah.
I just tell the story. And then maybe I have to go back and say, step back and look at it and say, okay, what did I just do? What just
Hmm.
happened there? How do I talk about this thing that I created? Um, in the case of this particular story, everything is starts out, and we actually toward the end of the book discuss this a little bit. It starts out very small. It starts out in Harrow's head and on this island, and these small things that are happening. And over the course of the story, the things that are happening get bigger and have bigger implications until the end when things hit that cosmic horror level and get very big indeed. But I wanted the story to kind of continually expand. And I think that psychological to cosmic to me is that small to big. It's that story expanding or flowering. Does that make any sense at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think for me too, but like again, this book is so emblematic of the coming of age experience to me because it my role in the world became very frightening whenever I realized how big the world was.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that felt so true in this book whenever, you kind of have that moment when you realize when you're growing up like, "Oh, it's not just about me. This is much bigger than me, and I don't know where I'm gonna slot into this place or what my role is in this place and all these other things." And kind of how, she interacts with her friends, I feel like is really emblematic of that as well. In fact, she has a female best friend who like she's kind of fallen out of touch with,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
they go together on this trip and she's kind of hoping that they can, be friends again. And that's something I know that I went through whenever I was
Yeah.
growing up, especially with female friendships, you're super close one minute and then something happens and you're not and you feel like you're on an island and you don't know what to do with all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
And I also kind of wanted to give you the space to talk about her dynamic with her friends because I feel like each relationship that she had with them was very, very important to a challenge that she faced or something that she had to overcome or something that she learned about herself.
Yeah. So with this book, so something in my own writing, I don't mind and sometimes very much enjoy reading a romance in a book.
Oh yeah.
It's something that I absolutely enjoy in other people's writing. It's not something that I do. I don't write romance. It's just not something I'm interested in writing, and I don't think I'd be very good at it. But in this book, I was very, very interested in love. I was
Hmm.
interested in very intense love. And to me, one of the most intense loves that happens in my own experience, having been a 16-year-old girl, are those girl friendships at that age. They're the early teens into mid-teens, those girl friendships are as close to romance as you can get without being romance. They are they are so powerful and they burn so hot. And I kind of wanted to look at one of those friendships on the other side of it. So what had happened after maybe an estrangement had happened, after that fire had burned out, and what's left behind. And what was left behind was a young woman who really wasn't ready to give that up. She wasn't ready to give up that hot, bright love that she had with that friend. And that love drives her through the story. She makes choices throughout the story, very much dependent based on that love that she feels. Um, which is not something that she wants to feel early on. And then as we get into the story, she embraces it and realizes that maybe there's a place for that feeling.
Yeah, that rings so true to me in my experience of trying to navigate and still sometimes to this day trying to navigate relationships that maybe
Yeah.
have fallen off the wayside, like didn't go as planned, or there's this thing that you don't know how to overcome. And I think the really big thing that you kind of keep coming back to with this book, is the how easy it is to not feel emotion, to seclude, to isolate. And one of the biggest things that at least I've found in reading horror fiction, and not so much with movies, but particularly with horror fiction, is that seclusion is always madness. Like you
Hmm.
always end up going mad if you are
Hmm.
secluded. And vulnerability is fucking terrifying. But
Right, right, right.
but learning to be vulnerable may just be what saves your life. And I kind of wanted to maybe hear from you if that, kind of aligns with your philosophy with this book, if, that's where you wanted that journey that you wanted to take Carol on, and the role of isolation in this story for her. Like how fucking terrified she is to experience and interact with her emotions to the point where maybe she doesn't even recognize some of them, you know?
Well, I think all of that is spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on. But I think sadly for Harrow, she's also fighting a losing battle from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So, she in her head has come up with this elegant solution of locking away her feelings, and she lets them out, or they sneak out occasionally, but she puts them back in, and she feels like this is working. Well, realistically, that's not working for her. That's never worked for her. She still has all of these feelings. She can just pretend she doesn't. She can deny that she does, lock them away, but it doesn't change the fact that she has those feelings. Those feelings are her. She is them. They can't truly be put away that like that. So this is Harrow honestly fooling herself. But
Yeah.
but that lie she tells herself is so powerful that she believes it, and it has a power of its own once they get on the island that comes into play and is very important.
Yeah. And that's so it kind of leads me to my next point, and we're going to talk about this as loosely as possible.
Sure.
But you mentioned that you wanted to lean into the horror with this book, and I'm not going to lie to you, Laura, like this book scared the shit out of me. Like
Yay.
this
That
book
makes me,
was
I mean, sorry, but yay.
no, 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 it's okay. It's very people say that books sometimes are cinematic in a way that it's very easy to picture them in their mind, and I just think it that goes a long way to say that the imagery of the book is very strong. But the horrors that you institute on this island, there's for instance, I don't think this is going to be a spoiler, but there's like a walkie-talkie situation. They have
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
walkie-talkie, and then, something starts interacting with the walkie-talkie that may or may not be somebody else on this island. The dialogue that accompanied that, I mean, I get chills right now thinking about it. I just wanted to give you the space to talk about the horror that you instituted on this island, the things that kind of pop up and crop up that these characters have to deal with. And like if you had any inspirational points that you kind of like drew reference from to create this really, really horrific situation.
So I'm going to start rambling and then we can
Perfect.
just talk. How's
Perfect.
that?
That's perfect.
Because there's not like one clear point of inspiration, but there are a few that are there. So there are a couple of books that I'm sort of obsessed with.
Yeah.
And one is by an author called Drew McGarry. And the book's called The Hike, and it's from
Okay.
2016. And this book is it's about a businessman who is staying in a hotel in rural Pennsylvania. He goes out for a hike before dinner and shit goes sideways. And it gets
Hmm.
really, really bad, really, really fast. And that's the book. It's a short, fast book. Um, I've read it, I don't know, two or three times. I think it's real divisive actually, but I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I I hold it up on a pedestal. And there's another book called Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. Kate Alice
Hmm.
Marshall. And that is a story about a young woman whose sister disappeared a year before. Um, Allegedly in their town, there's this mythology about this road that appears one day out of the year, and her
Hmm.
sister theoretically disappeared on this road. And so this young woman and her friends one night, the night of the road, go to find it and see if they can find the sister. And again, the walk starts, and then shit goes sideways and gets real bad. Both of these books are they're incredibly different from one another, but they're both highly surreal, bizarre. You cannot see what's coming from one moment to the next. They just do what they want to do, and it's brilliantly unpredictable. Um, I really wish I'd written both of those books. I have envy about both of those books. And so I think with Unnamed Bones, and actually another project that I'm working on, I think I'm writing books that I w would hope could sit on a shelf with those.
Yes, yes.
I want it to neatly sit on that shelf and for no one to question why it's there. And so that was a big part of the inspiration. This idea of a thing, an ordinary thing going sideways very badly,
Yeah.
which I was shooting for. And specifically with the walkie, one of the scariest things, and I'm hard to scare. I've been reading horror since I was little, so I'm hard to scare. But there's an audiobook for Stephen King's Room 1408. And it in 1408 there's a voice on a telephone.
Yeah.
And the voice on that telephone, I'm getting goosebumps right now. It's one of the scariest things I've ever heard in my life. I hate it and I love it so much. I hate it, but I love it. And so anyone who's listened to that audiobook knows what I'm talking about. And so that voice on the walkie on the island was my attempt at the voice on the phone in 1408. That's my homage, I suppose.
There's so many things I want to pull apart and talk about with this, but I'm gonna pick the
Sorry, I told
most.
you I was going to ramble. I
No, no,
rambled.
this is literally what the podcasting format is for, and this is the shit that I love. So this is perfect.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to pull apart is it's so funny to me though. Like from like obviously I read the text of Unnamed Bones, and the dialogue of the walkie came through very clear as audio for me because I mean I've used a walkie-talkie in my life.
Huh?
I know the lingo that you're supposed to use with Roger over and like all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but the reading it, it's text, but like you just said, you listened to this audiobook that kind of brought this voice to life. It always fascinates me endlessly whenever we can kind of cross wires on those senses, like with
Hmm.
hearing and writing. And like, does that feel different to you when you write it? Like whenever you're tapping into the audio side of the thing that influenced you versus
hmm
like thing that you've read?
Yeah, audio works really well for me. I'm pretty sure I have what the internet kind of started talking about 3 or 4 years ago. Is it aphantasia, where you
I
can't see things
gotcha.
in your head?
Hmm.
Um, I'm pretty sure that's me because I don't see things in my head. Like I don't can't have I don't have pictures in my head. So audio is super effective for me, and listening to a story told is super effective for me.
Yeah.
Um, so I suppose it makes sense that that would have resonated enough that I would try to recreate it in a story.
Yeah.
Um, and it's why I'm always so happy when I hear that like the visuals in my story work because I'm never certain that they do. Like because I
Yeah.
can't see them. So I'm never actually certain that they do work until I get feedback that they do.
Right. Well, and this kind of tees me up for my next point on something else that you said whenever you answered the previous question. You were talking about writing the books that you want to sit next to these other books that you
Yeah.
really, really
Yeah.
love. And I think that there's, everybody gives the advice is that you should write the book that you want to read, like
Uh-huh.
write the book that, you wish that you had when you were XYZ, however old that you want in your hands. And that's not always an easy thing to pull off. It's
No,
a
not
very
at all.
illustrious idea that's like, oh my gosh, yes, how great and how inspiring, but it's actually really fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, writing books is really hard. Let's be real. Like
yeah,
writing books is really hard.
exactly. But I wanted to talk about that idea of why it's so complicated because to me, it's so overwhelming about what makes a book work and why I love it and try
Yeah.
like there's the idea of putting too much in a book and
Uh-huh.
how much do you put, like how much of belongs to this book and how much belongs to maybe another and all of these things. Like, do you ever think about those things whenever you're writing, or is it a very clear story for you?
Um, it depends on the book.
Hmm.
So A Name Bones was pretty clear.
Yeah.
I don't plot. I don't like outline or anything like that. I usually have like a page of notes that I return to and that
Yeah.
changes as the book changes. But I don't plot necessarily, but I do a lot of pre-work in my head before I start actually writing. And Unnamed Bones was pretty clear to me. I didn't have everything mapped out, but I knew that I wanted to get from this very intimate small point A to this very expensive point B. And
Yeah.
how I was going to get there was sort of the journey of the writing. The book I'm working on now, I've got an unannounced project that I'm working on. I am struggling with that. With am I putting too much into this book? And I'm just this morning was actually thinking about an element and whether or not to include it because I'm not sure if it's one step too far. So
Yeah.
it is a problem sometimes. It was a problem sometimes in Blight Harbor that there would be those stories are very episodic and there'd be one episode too many. And I'd have
Mhm.
to kind of dial it back and say, okay, I love this thing, but this is a darling that has to go.
Yeah.
Um, So that does happen for sure. Didn't happen in Unnamed Bones, but it does happen.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing to me that I never really anticipated because I've just started to kind of try and write creatively. But the thing about it is, and you just brought it up as well, is like you're not a plotter. I don't know. I don't want to say I don't know how people plot because you can. I think that you can plan, but I can't tell you the amount of times that I've sat down to write something and something just spun out
Yep.
spontaneously that I never would have thought of ahead of time that and like I think it works. I mean, I don't know if it works, but it seems like it works. Like it
Yep.
seems like to fit thematically very well. And I'm always very curious how that feels for people because to me it feels like it's very jarring in some
Mhm.
ways to have stuff come to you on the spot whenever it books are such big projects, they're such big undertakings. And to I don't want to say to leave it to chance, but to leave it to situational awareness and like listening to your own work it's a very weird experience, and I'm very curious if you've ever had that happen to you, of these things kind of coming to you as you write and excelling
Oh,
the story in a way that you never anticipated.
yes, yes. There's an example I always use in Clackety, my first book. One of my favorite moments in the book truly came to me as I was writing, and
Yeah.
I got to it and said, "Oh wow, oh that's what's going to happen." Okay, okay, let's do that. There was a similar moment in Unnamed Bones. So I don't think it's giving too much away to say these kids are kind of literally walking a path to a
Oh
place.
yeah.
There's a goal. They need to get to a place. And along that path, they come across a tent. And that tent sort of showed up on the other side of the trees for me. And I said, "Really? Okay, okay. Oh, that's who's in that tent. Got it." And I just sort of ran with it. And it ended up becoming one of my favorite elements of the book,
No, I
the
really
tent and
enjoyed.
what happens around it.
Yeah, I enjoyed that aspect as well. It was something that I wasn't expecting, and like in the best way, because of, again, I don't want to spoil, but they come back to the tin at one point, and the
Yeah,
implication of that is very, very big, and that was thematically like very powerful in the book for me. But yeah, no, writing's just fucking crazy. There's
it is.
no,
It's
there's
bonkers and it's a miracle that books get written. It is a miracle. I don't care if you're a plotter, if you're not, whatever your method is, it's a miracle they happen at all.
no, I totally feel that. And I feel honestly, I feel like a book like Unnamed Bones, it feels like so much of a miracle to me to see like my own thoughts and feelings reflected in somebody else's work like this, because I think it's very easy to get lost in, especially when you're writing about feeling an emotion and vulnerability and like these really big, not tactile ideas. They are
Yeah.
invisible. We can't reach out and touch them. I feel like it'd be very easy to get lost in them, but that doesn't happen in Unnamed Bones. Did you ever feel a little lost in this book, or did it always feel kind of certain for you?
This book felt, I have been lost in books before, but not in this one.
Okay.
This book felt certain to me. I
That's
felt,
awesome. Yeah.
we'll see if that confidence is in vain or if it's earned or not. But I do feel confident about this book. How it will be received by the world, I have no idea. I have no idea what the world's going to think about this book. But I feel strongly that I've put out, for me, a good book, and I think that it's something different. And so yeah, I never really doubted this particular story.
Yeah.
Again, we'll see what the world thinks, but I
Well, no,
felt all right.
I don't think even, and I didn't mean to pose that question as like, well, what will everybody else think? I think for me, it's like even, does the story still make sense to you? And like obviously it should, if you're moving forward with it and you get, you drafts and revisions and edits and all this
Yeah.
stuff, but still talking about teenage emotions and coming of
Yep.
age is such an overwhelming,
Yeah.
so there's a reason why books like this are so powerful, I think, is because it's so difficult to give language and vocabulary to it, and to do so is very, very powerful.
Well, I'm glad it worked. And I mean, even though, as we talked about earlier, the story starts small and kind of expands, we do begin and end in Harrow's head for
Yeah.
all intents and purposes. I mean, the most important parts of this story, in some ways, are in her head. And so it was really important to me that that was treated with a lot of respect and treated like a legitimate part of the story, right? It wasn't just kind of an add-on to the
Yeah.
plot. It was absolutely integral to the plot that what's happening in Harrow's head matters. Um, so hopefully it was respected throughout the book.
Yeah, I think that grounding point really drives it all home, and because that is the touchstone throughout,
Yeah.
and what she is referencing, and because she's our main character, we're sitting through her with all of this. What she references and touches, and kind of what gets her through is that, and so that to make that paramount is so important.
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of ask, there's one other big thing that I thought about last night. I highlight whenever I read, and I have one thing that I highlighted in this book, and it's a line, and I don't think it's spoilery for me to say, and I can cut it if it is.
Okay.
But you make a distinction between fear and terror.
Hmm.
And Harrow says at one point, she says, "What I know for sure is that terror left me behind, and fear waited for me, and that's not nothing." And I kind of just wanted to give you the space to talk about how you view fear and terror, the difference between the two. And because to me, that feels huge, like within the genre itself, how we
Yeah.
think of fear and terror and kind of this vocabulary that we've given to the things that we experience when we read in the genre. So if you have any thoughts on the difference between fear and terror, I would
Yeah.
love to hear them.
Yeah, I'm sure I do. Let me think about this. So for me, fear is not a negative emotion. Fear is protective, and it can be motivating, and it can be sense making. Fear is not a bad thing.
Hmm.
Fear is healthy. Fear helps us get safely through the world and through life. And like I said, it can stop us and it can motivate us. It can do lots and lots of positive things. Terror, on the other hand, again, this is just the way I picture these things,
Hmm.
is not protective. It's not motivating. It is show-stopping. It
Yeah.
is terror is all encompassing. Terror doesn't leave room. Fear leaves room um, for hope and love and other things. Terror is screaming in your ear. Terror doesn't leave room for anything else. When you're in a moment of terror, that's all you have. And I think those are the big differences between the two.
Yeah. That feels applicable to my understanding of the two. And like, for me, whenever I hear that something whenever I hear that someone is fearful or is experiencing fear, you ask like, well, why? Like what is causing that? But whenever you hear that someone is being terrorized, you immediately
Yeah,
feel fearful yourself, and you're like,
yeah,
well, what is, like there's a more immediate action, I feel like, to terror compared to fear. And that's something that like I think that we read about and we think about, but to kind of give it that spotlight was really interesting to me in this book and in this way, and kind of how it applies to Harrow's story as well. But it made me think big picture, much like this book. It started out small and then made me think big picture about like the role in the horror genre and how we talk about fear and terror and those things. So no, that makes a lot of sense. But I think that wraps about all of my very specific. I mean, I have plenty more questions, but I don't want to spoil things for people about this book. So I feel like these are the safe ones that we can chat about without spoiling things about Unnamed Bones. But I do want to ask, what does the rest of your year look like? You have this book coming out in July, but is there like any book like appearances to promote the book, any other releases, anything else that we can promote for you?
You know, I don't have a ton planned for this year. My dad passed in April
Oh, I'm so
after a
sorry.
long year of being very, very sick.
Yeah.
And I sort of disengaged in a lot of ways, and I'm just finding my footing again. And
Yeah.
so I'll do some local appearances. Like I didn't go to Stoker this year. I wanted to, but it just wasn't the year for it.
Yeah, totally.
So I'll do local things this year. I'm in Eastern Washington State. I may get over to Seattle for something in that part of the state, but I don't think I'll travel beyond there. I've got a family trip planned that's going to take up some time this summer, but beyond that, I think I'll be close to home. And that's pretty much it for this year. This is my only book coming out this year, so I'll be able to kind of dedicate myself to Unnamed Bones for the year. Um, I'm working on edits for the fifth and for now final Blight Harbor book that'll come out next year. And I'm drafting an as of yet unannounced adult project
Right
that is
on.
due out in 28. So that's what I'm working on for now.
Okay. Well, theoretically, I know that this is an unannounced project and I'm not trying to press you for
Yeah.
details, but I do want to ask a little bit more of the craft question here. How's drafting adult horror been for you? Like, has it been any different? Like how's that process been going?
It's it feels like writing a book. I mean, I'm not trying to be like snarky.
Oh,
Like it all
yeah.
they all feel like writing a book. They all feel different. Every book is different. And this one, I am having fun because I don't have to worry about any gatekeepers at all. You know,
Yeah.
it's, I can just tell the story the way I want to tell the story. And this one is it's gonna be pretty gross. It's
Oh,
gonna
hell yeah.
have a lot of dark humor, and it's very much for the grown-ups. It's I'm not writing this one for the kids at all. So if my middle grade audience picks this one up, it will be a bad day. That's not who I'm writing this story for at all. So the gloves are off and I'm having fun with it.
Oh,
That's for sure.
that's what I love to hear. I think I don't know. Some of the most fun that I think that I've ever heard people talk about or even myself experience writing is whenever you just kind of let it go and just like
Yeah.
let it rip. So it's always really it's fun to hear authors talk about those instances like these, I interview a lot of authors and there's always like one scene in a book that I'm like, man, you really like went to town on that one. Like you, and then everybody starts laughing. And that's like the default. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I know that that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's awesome. No, I'm really excited for that project. And I'm gonna get to the Bite Harbor books and maybe we can do this again next year whenever book 5 comes out.
Sure.
But
Sure.
no, I want to thank you, I'm obviously was not a middle grade reader. I was not of the age demographic whenever these
Uh,
books came out. Um, but I know I've talked to enough people and having read Unnamed Bones, what you're doing for kids and giving them vocabulary to talk about fear and anxiety and horror in a way that's accessible, it's huge. And I just respect middle grade authors so much because I know it's not easy, like you said, to find the not conventional ways to talk about these things that are not, because our adult world, we have swearing and drinking and all these other things that we can
yeah.
reference, but you can't do that with kids. And so I have so much respect for middle grade authors who are able to give kids the vocabulary and the resources and stories to understand their world around them. So I'm super thrilled for the next Pied Harbor book that Unnamed Bones is going to come out and everything else.
Oh, thank you. I will say that writing for the middle grade and young adult audience, it's this sounds pandering, but it's not. It's truly an honor. It's such a gift to be able to do it. They're the coolest audience.
Yeah,
Kids are so open to story and they're so open to impossibility and you don't have to like work around all of their biases and all of their, hard wiring. They're open to story and it's so much fun to write for them and to be able to do that. So I feel really, really fortunate that it's one of my jobs that I get to do.
that's so awesome. I'm so thrilled for from where you work to get out there. But no, I'm so thrilled for Unnamed Bones in particular, and it comes out in July. I am gonna annoy everybody and tell them to go pick up a copy.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, Laura, for talking to me about this book. I know it probably was not very easy to talk about this book without spoiling things, but I think that we did it. I think that we
I
pulled
think
it
we did.
off. I
I
think
think
we
we
did.
did it.
I think we did great. So yay for us, and thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.
Another really, really big thank you to Laura for her time and for this really meaningful conversation. I meant every word at the end about how much I respect her and her craft and what she is able to accomplish both in middle grade and young adult genres. I am so stoked for her adult horror novel whenever that comes out. But I'm also just thrilled for any and all of her writing after reading Unnamed Bones. Just seeing the amount of emotional ground that she was able to cover in such a meaningful way, it is just absolutely stellar. And I am a fan for life now. So there you have it. I'm going to move on to some announcements now. If you follow me on social media, you have been seeing that I've been posting some pieces for Darker Times and stuff. We had our soft launch over the summer. And now, this week, we have kicked off our first subscriber drive. And if you aren't familiar with what a subscriber drive is, in this particular instance, we are trying to get to 500 paid subscribers by around the middle of August to kind of help grow Darker Times, unlock some new benefits for our paid subscribers, and just grow the platform in general. The thing about Darker Times, as I've talked about before, and I'll mention again, is that we are worker owned. That means that the people who are bringing you Darker Times are the only people in charge. We are the only people who are working on this thing. We don't have to answer to anybody else. We can write about the things that we want to write about, which is awesome. But it also means that all of our funding comes from subscribers. So what we are doing is we are absolutely going super hard in the next few weeks on Darker Times. We're going to have guest pieces from some really awesome creators, authors, horror fans, just these incredible pieces of writing. We kicked one off today, or actually yesterday, in the world of podcasting. This was yesterday, with Rachel Harrison. She shared a piece about her anxiety and horror and depression, and it was so incredibly moving. And we've got so many more of these kinds of pieces coming from other authors that I cannot wait to share with all of you. And for the most part, these will be free, but some of these are only going to be available to our paid subscribers. So this is where it kind of pays to be a paid subscriber, for lack of better words. We're also going to be announcing our book club this week. If we hit X amount of subscribers, we're going to unlock our movie club. You can get access to our Discord. There's all kinds of things that we're doing, and all of the specifics are laid out on Darker Times' website. If you go to our summer subscriber drive tab, everything will be laid out for you there. But yeah, that's what I'm promoting right now. That's what I'm working really, really hard on. I did start school, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, and I am super busy, but I'm so freaking thrilled that Darker Times is where it's at, and I get to share and promote it in this way. So please, if you are a horror fan who loves thoughtful criticism, creativity, anything of the like, and you've liked anything that's come out of Darker Times, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. It would mean the world to me and my co-writers, co-founders over at Darker Times. All right, now all of that being said, my hope is always to bring you guys bonus episodes during the week. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it just doesn't, especially lately with being in school and writing so much for Darker Times and getting the regular podcast episodes out. Just stay tuned. Watch my social media. Some of these will pop up and drop. All of the links will be available there. You can catch all of that information there. Thank you so much to everyone who listens, who supports, who follows along, offers encouragement. You all are the absolute best, and I am so thankful for all of you. So, till next time, go pick up a copy of Unnamed Bones, go check out Darker Times, and I'll see you all later.